Everyone, I'm excited to have Celeste Warren with me. She has had a almost 3 decade long career at Merck, a global Fortune 100 company, and she rose to the position of Vice President and Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. She has championed D&I across not just Merck, but across the industry and across the globe. After retirement, she founded Celeste Warren Consulting, and she continues to reshape the landscape of D&I. Very, very exciting that Celeste also is the author of a book called The Truth About Equity. So I'm excited, Celeste, to dig in with you about that. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for the invitation.
So, Celeste, I always start with this question, which is how do you identify and how has that shaped your path?
Well, I identify as, well, my pronouns are she, her, and I identify as a Black female. And that has definitely shaped how my life's journey. When I was a child, I'm one of five siblings, and my father was the first Black teacher and Black principal in Western Pennsylvania. And so every day that he came home from work, my mom would ask him at the dinner table, "How was your day?" Normal question. And he would then proceed to talk about the challenges that he faced, the obstacles that he faced. But he didn't just talk about it to complain. He would then say, "And here's what I did about it." And so as a child, I learned that yes, there's going to be obstacles in the way. Yes, there's going to be barriers. Yes, there are going to be challenges, but we need to make sure that we are not using that as an excuse to not be able to succeed. And that's kind of what I learned from my parents and just every day on the at the dinner table. And that shaped me throughout my entire life.
Celeste, when you were progressing in your career, you took on eventually a very top role at a Fortune 100 company. I'm curious, as a Black female, for example, what is a challenge that you seem to consistently face based on your identity, and how did you overcome that challenge?
Oh, that's a great, great question. When I first got in the role, I was in the role for 10 years. And I never really wanted to be in that role. I was always on the succession plan for it, et cetera. I was heading up the HR organization for the manufacturing division at Merck. And I was enjoying it. I was a generalist. I never was a specialist. And I thought, I like what I'm doing because I was able to, every job that I had, I integrated the essence of diversity, equity, inclusion into every role that I had. So having the responsibility for the HR policies, practices, procedures for, at the time, it was like 17,000 global employees in the manufacturing division. And so I was able to integrate it into that, and I was having a great time. I had a great the head of the manufacturing division was also a black male and from the South, from North Carolina, and so we had a line vision on diversity and inclusion. And so I never wanted to go into a role because I go into that chief diversity officer role because I felt I had a great team around me. I had a great client group with me. We were able to do what we needed to do. And then stepping into the global role where there are leaders that I didn't even know, I wasn't even sure of. And I didn't think I knew that people didn't feel the same way about diversity, equity, and inclusion that I did. They weren't passionate about it. And so I didn't, it's like, do I really want to fight that fight? And then another thing that I used to tell my boss whenever she would bring it up to me, I'd say, oh, isn't that's just what's the word? It's just so everyone always expects the Black girl to be the head of diversity and inclusion, or the woman of color, or the man of color, or the person with disabilities. It's always just expected, and it's like, you know what, I don't want to do that. And so one day, my my boss called me over. It was a regular one-on-one that we had. She called me over to her office and she said, "Look, I want to ask you something. I know how you feel about stepping into this head of diversity and inclusion role, but we really want you to do it. We really need your fire in your belly, your passion, because we just don't see it um, progressing like we want it to progress." And so I looked at her and I said, "Well, who's we?" And she said, "Well, me and Ken." And Ken Frazier was the CEO at the time of the company. And I thought, and she said, "In fact, Ken wants to talk to you about it." And I thought, here's my way out because he's a busy man. He's not going to be able to see me for probably another month or so. And by that time, I can sort of weasel my way out of this. And I said, "Sure, I'd love to talk to Ken, no problem." Well, she grabs my hand right then and there and walks me over to Ken's office, who was next door to hers. And we sit in the office. And one of the things that I was challenged with was I'm a Black female and I'm taking over this diversity and inclusion organization. And people are just going to be like, "Oh, well, isn't that sort of self-fulfilling, prophecy or self-serving because you want to do all you can for Black females and black individuals and females because you're a Black female. And so everything that you put in place, policies, practices, procedures is going to benefit and service you and your identity, people who identify the way you do." And I was really, really like concerned with that when I first got in the role. And so um, I ended up actually, if you can believe this, I was doing more for other identity groups and communities than I was for my own.
Mm.
And so that lasted for just a few short months. And I sat back one afternoon and I was thinking to myself, like, you're supposed to be the head of global diversity and inclusion. And you're supposed to be helping to create an inclusive culture for all identities. And because of how you feel, you're putting your Blackness to the back. So people won't feel like you're sort of self-serving. You're doing a disservice to those of African descent around the world in this company. And so I had to really have a talk with myself and just say, you need to move forward with the work that needs to be done to create a more inclusive and equitable environment for everyone. And if people think that you're just being self-serving because of the different things that you put in place, then so be it. That's their problem. It's not yours. And so I had to have this conversation with myself, and I talked to a lot of colleagues about it as well, including Ken, and really just said, get over yourself,
Mhm.
get over yourself and stop trying to placate what someone else may be thinking when it doesn't matter what they think about that. You need to be doing this body of work and elevating the voices across all identities, not all of them excluding your own. So yeah, that was a great question because that was something that I really struggled with as I was going in this role.
It's interesting, Celeste, as both of you and I care a lot about serving people. We never ever want to think that, or other people think that we ourselves are selfish and putting ourselves first. It's
Hmm.
the antithesis is all that we stand for.
Yes.
So I want to talk about your book because your book talks about this idea of equity. It's a chance for everyone to rise. But yet we see, well, look, you're Black female, you're going to be able to take advantage of that given all the work you're doing. And now I'm going to lose. Or there's only one role here. It's not that there's roles for everybody. Whoever wants a role can take that role. There's only going to be one or just a few. So why do we, whatever you're doing as head of D&I, that's going to hurt me. And now I'm going to push away not only me, but my children. So you got the mama bear in there fighting that this is it's not fair and it's going to hurt me. How do you, I know you talk about this in the book, like how do you manage that perception? Because it's quite pervasive.
Yes, very much so. There is a huge, huge fear that something's going to be taken away from me. because you are giving it to other people. And I try to take it out of the sort of there's only one job or there's five jobs, because jobs are going to come and go, and there's always going to be opportunities. And there may be one or two now, but next week or next month there's going to be other opportunities. That's just the flow and ebb of an organization. But what I try to do is use the analogy it's that I use in the book about the rocks in the fence. And everyone's seen the analogy, but for those of your listeners that aren't familiar with it, there's a illustration. It was created by Deloitte, and it shows in the first illustration, there's three individuals that are standing on one rock, and there's a fence in front of them. The person on the right can't see over the fence, even with the one rock. The person in the middle can barely see over the fence. The person on the left can clearly see over the fence. In the second illustration, the people on the right have been given additional rocks. So the person on the right, far right, has been given two additional rocks. They have three. The person in the middle has two. Person on the left has one, continues to still have one, but now they can all see over the fence. In my analogy, I basically say the rocks have been acts of equity that have been put in place because the fence is there. And the fence represents the isms, the longer term issues that exist within organizations and institutions and in society as a whole that are going to take longer term and longer time to sort of dismantle. So I call them the isms: racism, sexism, homophobia, xenophobia. And so we have to do all of that work. But that person, now what's happening, because that's causing a disruption, because that person that was standing on one rock in both those illustrations, well, they're looking to their right and they're saying, well, how come they have three rocks, they have two rocks, and I still have one? You've given them an advantage that I don't have. And the reason why they feel that way is because they have always been able, first of all, to see over the fence. Second of all, sometimes they don't even know the fence is there, because they don't know how that fence manifests itself in behaviors and mindsets, policies, and procedures that exist that are causing obstacles and barriers to his colleagues on the right. And so while we're putting the rocks in place, the acts of equity, while we're doing the longer term strategic work of tearing down the fence and getting rid of those isms, we have to also be having conversations with the individual to help them to understand that you had one rock in the first illustration, you were able to overcome these obstacles created by the fence. You have one rock in the second illustration, you're still able, because you've always been able to overcome it, and help them to understand how that fence manifests itself to those individuals on the right, what that looks like in behaviors, in obstacles, in mindsets, in barriers. And then get them to get in the boat, grab an oar, and row, be active allies to help us to get to that third illustration where the rocks aren't needed, the fence is torn down, and everyone can see the beautiful mountains ahead. Even that individual who was standing on one rock can see not just the top of the mountains, but their aperture has been widened. The screen has been widened for them, and they can see even a broader horizon. And the problem is, because they don't see the fence, they only see the rocks being given to the other colleagues. They don't understand the whole ecosystem of what's happening. And that's what I try to do. I try to explain that ecosystem. I try to explain that fence and what it looks like in a variety of different ways. But that illustration, whenever I've talked about it, and I've been talking about this since 2019, and either within my organization and especially outside. And when people hear that, they're like, oh, okay, I get it. I understand it. I understand now that I was always able to see over the fence, and it's not like something was taken away from me. You didn't take away my rock. You just gave them rocks so there could be equal access, more equitable access to everyone while we work together to tear down and dismantle the fences. And I also try to say, look, it's not a pie. It's not a pie where there are only a finite set of resources. And I try to get them to think like it's a bar chart. And the bars can go up, through infinity. And so understanding access from that standpoint is really, really important. And so it's not an easy conversation by any means, because you're walking this tightrope, because you're talking about just as the things that I learned from my dinner table, from my mother and father and grandparents, the things that some people were taught by their parents, by their grandparents, by their aunts and uncles at family reunions are sometimes not as inclusive as we would want them to be. And so you're walking this tightrope as you educate and make people aware of situations, and not saying, well, are you challenging are you calling my mom and dad liars or this? And it's like, no, that's their belief system. I'm trying to talk to you about another belief system, another perspective. And then at the end, you can choose to align yourself to whatever belief system that you feel comfortable with. But I feel like I need to have this conversation with you, because that disruption is happening in workforces and in communities around the world.
Celeste, I love your own depiction of what that rocks and fences analogy is. I've seen that multiple times, but yours is the most robust because I always just saw the rocks and I didn't
Hmm.
understand actually what the fences represented. And for this one, it was like a baseball field, but I do think
Yeah.
looking at the mountains, we all want to, right, have access to the beauty of the mountains. But how might we be, in this case, have a fence in front of us that prevents us from enjoying life, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Which we would say is God given, like, to be able to enjoy the beauty of nature. And I think about how you say, look at all of these structural isms, well, then pointing to it's not that they're given more, it's now allowing them to see.
Hmm.
And now we're able to compete and share, and it's not actually a pie, it's a bar graph.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about that because I live in New York City, and while I love the city, it feels sometimes like a rat race where
Mm.
it's a survival of the fittest. And we learn about that Darwinism, and it feels like this in New York City. And so, as much as I want to say, well, everybody who puts in good effort and does quality work, we can all succeed. It truly is a bar graph. And yet I have the reality of where I am and how difficult it is, even for the best, right? Even the
Mhm.
best of the best. So how do you talk me? I know it's not about jobs, so I don't want to be like it's a job thing, but how do you narrate that? Because I know this is your specialty and people are quite senior, right? And you're talking to a lot of influential leaders. How do you get them over that it's not actually a pie, a fixed pie, it's a bar graph?
Yeah, it's the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset.
Mm,
So a fixed mindset would be everything is going to stay exactly the same way that it is right now. Because in that second illustration, the reason why the rocks need to be given is because we haven't torn down the fence yet. We're not at that third illustration. We are in a place today,
mm,
in the world today, and probably, for a pretty long while until we can do that work, that longer term work of tearing down the fence. And so the reality is we are in that second illustration. We are in a rat race. We are in a place where reality is that there's the one percenters, there are the people who are still marginalized and in marginalized groups. That's reality today. And so the conversation that we need to have is, how do we get to tomorrow? How do we get to that third illustration? How do we work together to be able to do that? And that's kind of the conversation that I have to have with folks, because I'm a pragmatist. I'm a realist. It's like, okay, here's where we are today, but the difference is I don't have a fixed mindset. I don't
mm,
believe that we're going to stay here. I
mm.
have a growth mindset. I believe that if we do the work, we put the right things in place, we get the right people that are going to get in the boat, grab the oar. If we do all of that work, we can get to a place that where everyone has access to those opportunities. We're certainly by no means there today. And so the conversation turns to trying to get them from that fixed mindset to that growth mindset. What do we need to do? What are some of the things that need to be done? And also not to get them to a point where It's like they're paralyzed. Like, okay, that's too much work. You're trying to boil the ocean. But it's like I always tell people that, they'll say to me, Celeste, I mean, that's crazy. You're trying to boil the ocean. That's too much. That's too much. And I say, no, I'm not trying to boil the ocean personally. What I'm trying to do is get people to boil two or three people around them. And once that happens, it becomes a ripple effect. And you're not only affecting the two or three people around you, they're affecting two or three people around them, and so on and so on and so on. And we create this ripple effect till all of a sudden we have boiled the ocean. And that's what I try to do. It's like we have a conversation around what is it that you can do on a daily basis, Mr. or Miss Manager, to with your team of 5 or 6 people. What are some things that you can do to help to create an equitable and fair workplace or team environment with your team? You can create your own ripple effect because then you're doing what you need to be doing with your team. Your peer managers are seeing what you need to be doing, seeing the outcomes that you're getting. And then they'll start to ask you, like, what are you doing? How are you getting those outcomes? So, like, that's really good. What are you doing? You can share with them, and so on, and so on, and so on. So it starts with one person, one act, boiling those two or three people around them so you can get to eventually at some point in time a boiled ocean. Does that make sense?
Yes. What I like about that, Celeste, is it doesn't have to be, I've got to save the world. Here I am, Superman, Superwoman,
Yes.
with my cape, and it's no one wants to have that pressure. I mean, I don't anyway. Let me just say,
No,
I
no
don't
one
want
does.
that. I'd rather do nothing than have the weight of the world on me. So I appreciate it because no matter who you are, what position, there is work that we could each do. And if we each do some of the work, it can create big change. So
Yeah.
I so appreciate the inspiration there because especially in this world now, could use hope and this growth mindset. So with that, let's go to lightning round questions.
Hey,
First question is chocolate or vanilla,
chocolate,
cooking or takeout,
take out,
climb a mountain or jump from a plane.
climb a mountain.
Have you ever worn socks with sandals?
Mm, no, I don't think so. My kids would be mortified.
How would you rate your karaoke skills on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being Mariah Carey?
Oh, I'm an 8. I can sing.
Nice. What's a good book you read, a book recently, or just
hmm
an all-time favorite?
Yeah, I'm a murder mystery buff. So I am currently reading Kendra Elliott, and the book is called Her First Mistake. But I love Mary Higgins Clark. I like Beverly Burton and Mary Barton. I love good mysteries.
What is a favorite way to practice self-care?
For me, a good way is exercising. So I have a small exercise room in my house with a treadmill and a rowing machine. So I try to exercise at least 3 or 4 times a week. And that's really, really critical. And then, secondly, getting rest. It's hard for me because I am a borderline insomniac. And
Mm.
so I really um, cherish sleeping. And so that ritual of doing what I need to do to make sure that I can get sleep is really important. So if you're exercising, getting exercising, and then also getting good sleep, that helps with not just your physical well-being, but also your mental health as well. It really helps me. If I have a stressful day, getting on the treadmill and walking is fabulous.
What's a good professional development you've done?
Um, Professional development, I would say, um, when I was going from being an individual contributor to being a manager director and having a larger organization, I went through some training there. Another thing that is really good is understanding yourself. So any training, whether that be Myers-Briggs or the communications profiles, working styles profiles, anything that you do that really is self-examination, and then saying, how does understanding who you are, your communication style, for example, and how that translates to how you are as a leader. I love all of that. And it's so insightful and it's so helpful to make you, anyone, I think, a better leader if they're receptive to the feedback.
That's always the point. Can you be
Yeah.
coached? What's your definition of a boss mama?
A boss mama is somebody who demonstrates servant leadership. Because
Mm.
even though you're the boss and of whatever, a family or leadership, um, you demonstrate servant leadership. So you wouldn't do anything that you haven't done or wouldn't do yourself. And then secondly, you have this nurturing aspect to your leadership as well, and that's the mama part comes in. Protecting your team, helping your team, nurturing and growing them, I think is really important, just like you would with your children.
What advice would you give your younger self?
Relax. Everything will be okay. You don't have to stress out about everything or be my nickname 30 years ago when I was starting in at Merck. My colleagues used to call, I was part of a big expansion and we were hired. There was like 20 of us that were hired at the same time in this organization. And they used to nickname me Lock and Load.
Wow, I love that. So good.
It's like she doesn't suffer fools, and so I've learned to polish that a bit, so I can be more receptive to people. My message can be more receptive, but yeah, just be relax. Everything will be okay.
Celeste, where can we find you? LinkedIn, where else?
Yes, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Instagram. The Instagram handle is CRW Diversity, and I also have a YouTube channel as well. And also on my website, www.crwdiversity.com, where you can contact me. We can engage. You can find out if you're interested in speaking, if you want me to come to your organization. Everything can be done through my website.
Amazing. And then last question,
Uh-huh.
any parting thoughts to share?
The only parting thought would be, equity isn't a end state. Equity is something that you work through, and it isn't a program. It's not a television show or something. It's a journey. And we all want to get to that space where it's that third illustration. But just everybody just do the body of work, do what you can with who you can, and I guarantee you'll make an impact.
Incredible. Celeste, thank you so much for this conversation. I learned a lot, and I'm sure my audience will enjoy it.
Thank you for the invitation. I love it.
Thank you.